Welcome to the Haunted Victory Kitchen. In this episode, we're investigating Halloween in wartime and the sinister doings of horrible children, eerie celebrations, and ghastly food. Prepare yourself for an hour that will chill you to your very bones. Welcome to The Victory Kitchen, the podcast all about American food rationing during World War II. I'm your host, Sarah Creviston Lee, author, historian, and vintage foodie. I'll be exploring the logistics of food rationing, featuring wartime cookbooks and recipes, and highlighting real homefront experiences. We're going to be learning exactly what our grandmothers had to do to get their food to fight for victory. Welcome back to another episode of The Victory Kitchen. I am so excited to talk about Halloween in wartime, and I apologize that this is not the episode about pets in wartime. That is coming up next. What happened was that I was planning to do that episode, and then I realized, oh wait, Halloween is coming. I've been wanting to do a Halloween episode, so I put that one on pause, and I did this one, and we'll be examining pets in wartime for the next episode. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you will enjoy this episode. There are so many interesting things that I found. Actually, there's a wealth of information in wartime newspapers and magazines, just so much stuff. So let's get to it. We're going to be starting with parties, including games and decorations, then talk about trick-or-treating, starting with tricks and then treats, and then we'll have some recipes and a fun homefront highlight. To start with, I wanted to read this fun excerpt from Life magazine from 3rd November 1941. It says, "This is the day when youngsters dress as ghosts or witches and carve gruesome faces and candlelit pumpkins. At parties, they bob for apples, play spooky games, and gorge themselves on pumpkin pie, ice cream, and cider. After this, the bolder spirits venture forth, hell-bent for such time-honored Halloween sabotage as sticking pins in doorbells, soaping windows, and overturning any available private property. For proof that Halloween devilment has not changed, turn the page." They've got some fantastic pictures, which I will have up in my Substack post for this episode, of children in all kinds of fun costumes. If that isn't the most perfect introduction to this episode, I don't know what is. So I'm not going to get into the history of Halloween and all this stuff. There are so many great website posts and other things that talk about that. So we're just going to focus on Halloween in wartime and the challenges that they faced. You know, Americans who wanted to celebrate Halloween faced quite a number of challenges. They faced shortages of sugar and even apples for cider, fats for soap, for playing pranks, and young men and women were scattered all over the country and the world. California's The Hartford Sentinel from the 26th of October, 1942 illustrates this really well. It says, "Halloween is going to be different this year, even though the traditional cider, donuts, and spooky atmosphere will be as much in evidence as ever. The gasoline shortage and curtailment of travel primarily will make this October 31st more of a family occasion than it has been since horse and buggy days, and the good old-fashioned custom of gay, happy house parties will be revived. But many of the guests won't be dressed in the hilarious, scary costumes of yore, for Army, Navy, and Marine uniforms will predominate. The National Halloween Committee, a nonprofit organization recently formed, is asking each and every family to invite at least one service member to its October 31st house party. And generous people all over the nation are responding wholeheartedly. Some communities are even staging citywide celebrations for the men in uniform. The ideal Halloween party this year will be streamlined for fun and relaxation for the whole family and uniformed guests as well. The wise hostess will remember that any serviceman's idea of a good time requires 3 things: dancing, lots of eats, and a few games to add to the hilarity. The eats present a problem all their own in view of the national effort towards food conservation. Homemade cakes and cookies are definitely out because there's not enough sugar to bake them. But the soldiers' time-honored favorite, the donut, bought at the grocery or supermarket, is an excellent substitute, particularly if all of the various kinds of iced ones are on hand. The meat shortage will rule out the usual cold cuts and meat sandwiches, but energy-filled cheese and similar spreads will please those military palates just as well. There are so many amazing things to point out in this article, but the big takeaway is that because so many men and women were away from home, the fact that they were making a plea to communities to invite these young men and women in their area to parties, this was a big emphasis. And, just make sure that they were included and not forgotten about, and that they could have some fun time celebrating the holiday, even if they weren't near family. They mentioned this National Halloween Committee, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. And then, of course, the problem with the food shortages. So those are other things that we'll be talking about later. So first, I wanted to focus on the parties themselves, because you cannot read in the newspapers without finding so much information and so many announcements about parties. The purpose of these parties wasn't just to have fun, but it was to keep children out of mischief. So many local churches and organizations threw parties, and then there were parties and dances for the teenagers. So a lot of times they were separate. Then there were also community parties. In the Hartford Courant from Connecticut in November 45 said, more than 5,000 ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards attended the dozen Halloween parties sponsored Wednesday night by the Recreation Division of the Hartford Park Department, while numerous others literally joined in hundreds of parties held by independent groups throughout the city. And then in another article in the same exact newspaper, it said, with smudged faces and voluminous costumes, Wethersfield youngsters trooped to 4 elementary schools Wednesday evening to help fill the largest parties so far sponsored by local organizations here. Children paraded their costumes before a trio of judges and watching parents and saw comedy films. A record crowd of 1,200 teenagers at the high school danced to the music of Jimmy Smith's orchestra and attempted no outlandish pranks under the eyes of 7 legionnaires and 2 policemen. Without regard to farmers' hay, youngsters lit brush fires through the early evening, calling out the fire department 5 times. So, they tried. So now we get to the National Halloween Committee. This was formed in New York in 1942. And in one newspaper, it talks about them. The National Halloween Committee of New York urges children's parties in an effort to combat juvenile delinquency. The committee urges rollicking parties this year and also stresses the importance of these parties for servicemen and women who are far from home. So, like I mentioned before, American families were asked by this national committee to plan parties for servicemen and servicewomen, or to make an effort to invite them into their homes for Halloween parties. And the National Halloween Committee also chose Mrs. Walter Thornton as its 1943 Halloween party girl. And I have a photo of her that I can share with you. She's in a witch's costume. So I will have that up on Substack so you can see. I wanted to talk a little bit about decorations. They are very similar to what we see today, with witches, pumpkins, black cats, and bats. Pretty much the same. The Atlanta Constitution from Georgia in October 45 talks about these decorations. Halloween parties are the easiest of all parties to give because corn stalks, pumpkins, black cats, and witches cut from yellow and black paper, and oranges with funny faces make the most suitable decorations. And I've seen a lot of articles that talk about this, about making homemade Halloween decorations and suggestions for them. And I like that they point out the oranges with funny faces. I've actually made a jack-o'-lantern cocktail recipe from 1944 where you hollow out an orange, just cut off the top, hollow it out, and cut a jack-o'-lantern face in the side of the orange. And then you chop up the orange pulp and you mix it with cantaloupe and you put it back in, and that's your fruit cocktail. It is actually really good, and they're super cute jack-o'-lanterns. They had all kinds of ideas back then. As for games at the parties, they played all kinds. Apple on a string, donut on a string, bobbing for apples, fortune telling, ghost stories. The traditions haven't really changed very much. Also in the Atlanta Constitution, it continues, what is more fun than the old-fashioned but ever-enjoyable games of bobbing for apples, pulling fortunes out of the big black wash pot set on the hearth, and obstacle races over candles or threading wet pumpkin seeds on a string? Okay, the obstacle race with candles sounds... I hope they're not lit. That sounds really dangerous. But the threading wet pumpkin seeds on a string, I think I might keep that in the back of my mind for an upcoming party, because that sounds like a lot of fun. The Plain Dealer newspaper from Ohio, October 1943, has a great example of what these parties look like. And the headline is, "If it's games you want, here are a few ideas. And the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. Yes, sir, they will, on the night of October 31st, when 'tis said they roam at large. At our party, the goblins will be very much alive and ready for fun. They will come dressed in old clothes, and the rumpus room will be the center of things, for here all ghosts and goblins really let themselves go." And then one of the activities is called Ghost and Goblin Den. The den for the ghosts and goblins will have an eerie lighting effect, blue bulbs being used, or dip white frosted bulbs in bluing. Gray crepe paper moss will be draped about the walls, and black bats, owls, skeletons, and grinning pumpkin faces hung from black threads will swing here and there. In one corner, Old Mother Witch will preside, dressed in a short, full skirt, red cape and red shoes, and conical hat. She will be stirring her cauldron, a black kettle placed over a simulated blaze made by an electric light bulb covered with red crepe paper and sticks. From the kettle, she will draw 2 packs of cards. Muttering to herself and shuffling the cards, she'll deal 1 deck to fellow ghosts and goblins until everyone has 1 card. Now she will start, turning up 1 card at a time from the second deck, but before turning it up, she'll ask a question from a long list which she has previously prepared, such as, who is the best looking person present, or who is the most intelligent person present, or who wears the best looking clothes. After Mother Witch asks the question, she turns up the card, then calls it out, the Ace of Spades or the Queen of Hearts, and whoever holds that particular card must quickly answer, I am. If anyone fails to answer promptly, that person will have to pay a forfeit and perform a stunt when Mother Witch is finished. Games and stunts will follow, including some of the following. They are games which will be fun for the entire family and friends, young or not so young. And so they have a list. Apple race, cat race, Satan's brand. Oh, that one's a scary one. Puss in Boots. Who is she? So these are some really fun ideas. Very dramatic. So I thought that was fun to read. In this booklet that I found called How to Run a Successful Party from 1947, they have some ideas also for Halloween games. There's this one game called Telegrams. Supply each guest with a pencil and paper and ask them to write telegrams using only 9 words beginning with the letters of Halloween. For instance, hope, already lost. Last offer, wasn't enough, eloping now. They also suggest a game of consequences. That's a really fun game I love to play with my friend Mari. And then there's an article in the Women's Home Companion from October 1941. And it's called Scarecrow AWOL. And the theme around this party is a scarecrow, but they use it in very creative ways, like using a pipe to like pin the tail of a donkey kind of, but see if you can land the pipe in his mouth kind of thing. They also use the scarecrow as the center of this murder mystery. And so the guests walk in and there's this scarecrow body on the floor with clues around the room, and guests have to go and guess like how he met his demise. Like, it's very creative. There's all kinds of party ideas that they had. Now, when it comes to shifting gears to trick-or-treating looked pretty similar to trick-or-treating today. Kids and teens dressed up in costumes, going door to door for treats. I'm sure adults did as well. I didn't find specific references for that, but it's very likely that at least some adults did, just like today. In the Hartford Courant from Connecticut, 1st November 1945, they talk about trick-or-treating. Hundreds of children filled the streets after darkness fell Wednesday, toting pumpkin lanterns, both genuine and fabricated, blowing horns and displaying all sorts of Halloween costumes and disguises. And we're joined at mid-evening by more hundreds of young people and adults who participated in prepared festivities. Isn't that interesting that they mention the pumpkin lanterns, both genuine and fabricated? Does that mean they're carrying around like actual pumpkins? That would be heavy. Anyway, so very similar to today, but that is where most of the similarities end. Of course, since it's wartime, there was a candy shortage. Some alternatives that people handed out were cookies, fruit, some candy that they could find, and popcorn. Again, in the Hartford Courant, it says, little folks fully aware of the candy shortage were particularly active as ringers of doorbells to shriek their demands for confections in accordance with the holiday privilege. They reported with some disdain acceptance of uncommonly large quantities of fruit and popcorn in place of candy, many of their benefactors explaining they couldn't obtain the sorts of candies they desired. One mother from Ohio suggested that children be equipped with war bond stamp books and neighbors give out war stamps to the children in lieu of candy or other treats. It would be profitable for the children and certainly patriotic for the adults, Mrs. Hillhouse said. She further suggested that teenagers could go around on Halloween collecting scrap. Well, I mean, that's a nice idea, but I don't think the children would have been very thrilled with that idea. You know, what's funny is with this candy shortage in the newspapers, I found so many ads from grocery stores and candy shops saying, like, advertising candy. So they must have had some candy and they were trying to get people to buy this candy. And apparently they did buy the candy that they could find. So it's just interesting that with the shortage, there were still ads for candy. So it must have been where they're located and the demand on the candy. I don't know. It's interesting. Now we get down to the tricks. Tricks ranged from innocent to downright unlawful, to the point that some communities didn't hold trick-or-treating at all. And I was talking to my stepmother. She is from Des Moines, Iowa. And she was telling me that for the longest time, they did not have trick-or-treating on Halloween because of this very problem. They would have trick-or-treating on the 30th of October, and then you had to perform some kind of trick or tell a joke in order to get your candy. So they kind of flipped it around a little bit. Some communities tried to put plans in place to prevent Halloween vandalism. And not just parties, they were trying to get the word out to children in advance that vandalism was not okay. In the Des Moines Register from 29th of October, 1942, the headline is, "Kids, don't help the Axis on Halloween. Soap and Tic Tacs are taboo. Ringing doorbells, not for you. Thoughts of pranks you must detour, lest you be a saboteur." Halloween definitely is going to be different this year in Des Moines. Children are being told in no uncertain terms that the best way to help the enemy is to go out and celebrate Halloween as usual Saturday night. Leaders of youth groups are working out plans to steer activities of children into non-destructive channels. School teachers this week have given special talks on how material destroyed on the home front hurts America's fighting men on the war fronts. On Friday night, without doing harm to the war effort, children may go from door to door and use the slogan "Tricks for Eats" instead of threatening to soap windows if no treats are provided. So, laying in on the heavy propaganda and patriotism guilt tripping. But I mean, you have to get to them some way, I guess, and making it clear that damaging property or stealing things was not okay. In the New York Times in October 1942, the superintendent of schools in Rochester, New York, wrote a letter to the city's 38,383 students a week before Halloween. He says, "Letting the air out of tires isn't fun anymore. It's sabotage. Soaping windshields isn't fun this year. Your government needs soaps and greases for the war. Carting away property isn't fun this year. You may be taking something intended for scrap or something that can't be replaced because of war shortages. Even ringing doorbells has lost its appeal because it may mean disturbing the sleep of a tired war worker who needs his rest. You know, those are really good points that I hadn't thought of before researching this episode, that, you know, these items that they think, you know, they're just having fun destroying or stealing could have another purpose, and ringing doorbells of people who are sleeping is not cool either. The school superintendent for Bridgeport, Nebraska sent out a message to his students in the same vein, including this statement: "There is no limit placed on the amount of fun youngsters might secure from parties and games, but that activity must be confined to harmless fun. Parents and townspeople are asked to cooperate in this move, parents by forbidding children to go on tricks or treats forays, and every resident by refusing to treat should some youngster be so bold as to try it." So they're really laying in on the responsibility of the adults of the town, like, we got to be strict about this, keep your kids reined in. Also, the Hartford Courant was a very useful newspaper. In fact, I mean, in this case, it was a successful Halloween night. This was the 1st of November, 1945. The police chief thanked the Hartford citizens for a quiet Halloween night. He was especially pleased with the way the people of Hartford responded to pleas for a sane celebration. He also thanked a number of unidentified dwarfish-appearing Canadian mounted police, English bobbies, and FBI men who appeared on the streets at various points in Hartford to aid in guarding the peace. However, in spite of the alleged shortage of soap supplies, that article was much in evidence during the evening, and police were astonished to note that even the Lone Ranger and Dick Tracy were engrossed at one household, aided by their parents in soaping the windows of their own home. I love that so much. You know, at least the parents were participating with the children and be like, hey, we can still have this good fun with our own soap supplies and soaping our own windows. St. Johnsbury, Vermont also had a successful, relatively peaceful Halloween night. In this article from the Caledonian Record from the 1st of November, 1945, it says, "There's honor among spooks, and St. Johnsbury's honor roll of young Halloween celebrators is a long one today. Hundreds of them took over the town last night and left it virtually as they found it. The official police deduction was that it was the mildest Halloween in years, insofar as recklessness and windows and car making is concerned. In the midst of the hilarity of the evening, a couple of porch chairs, a rooms to rent sign, and a bicycle disappeared from various sections of the village. By this morning, all had mysteriously returned none the worse for their experience. Positively nothing was damaged so far as the police could determine. Youngsters went in groups from pairs to tens, from door to door seeking goodies. And in almost every instance, they were rewarded, even though cookies, popcorn, and gum often were offered as a substitute for candy. Householders did mighty well in rounding up as much candy as they did," the spooks reported, and all in all, the youngsters consider it a very profitable evening. So those were the mild, innocent Halloween festivities. Let's get into the not-so-tame shenanigans. I found this one article in The Independent from California in 1945. The title says, "Young Goblin Tosses Pie, but Woman Ducks." That kind of tells it all, but let's read the story. Mrs. Rose Alcazar of 5929 The Toledo had a pie-smeared living room floor last night as a result of a Halloween quote-unquote trick. According to Mrs. Alcazar, several boys in the traditional spirit of the holiday rang her doorbell around supper time and gave her the usual trick-or-treat ultimatum. "I'm eating dinner now," she said. "Come back in 5 minutes." A few minutes later, the doorbell rang again, but when she opened it, a young Halloween goblin on the porch let fly with a pie. Mrs. Alcazar ducked just in time, and the pie went splattering across the living room floor. "It was a pineapple pie, too," she told police, "and I don't like pineapple pies." Well, I do. I love pineapple pie. And what a waste. Dang it. Anyway, I thought that was a funny story. Also, in that same newspaper, it was reported that policemen and detectives were called to neighborhoods where youngsters who scorned the mildness of the trick-or-treat approach were said to be smashing windows, putting hoses in mailboxes and turning on the water, and performing numerous other stunts not calculated to make the householders happy. In one instance, the hose was turned into a mail slot in a door, and the living room of the residents flooded. A pineapple pie was tossed at a woman's head, like we just read about. Luckily, she ducked in time. 2 fires were reported. In both cases, paper jack-o'-lanterns caught fire from the candles inside and burned drapes and window blinds. Yikes. Now, I think the fires were accidents, but that doesn't mean that children didn't light fires. They definitely did. It was usually like in leaf piles or farmers' hay, stuff like that. In the Caledonian Record in Vermont, interestingly, this column article was right next to the one of the happy times that nothing went wrong. This was a report on something that happened in Boston. Despite public parties, there were acts of vandalism and a couple deaths. One girl was near death due to fractures in her skull. She and a 15-year-old boy stole a car and went joyriding before being chased by police and crashing into a bridge. Cambridge had a destructive evening with streetcar trolleys disconnected, fences torn down, fires set, nails, glass, and ash barrels strewn in the streets, and plate glass windows smashed in some sections of the city. It said in 2 other Massachusetts towns, fire hydrants were turned on, flooding the streets and street lights, and school windows were broken by thrown rocks. It says hundreds of streetlights were broken, some by rifle shots, and even pigs were freed from pens to roam through the streets. And brush fires threatened homes. It was a wild time in Massachusetts. The author of the article blamed some of it on the, quote, pent-up enthusiasm of the youngsters and oldsters held in check fairly well during the war period was being blown off. Okay, maybe. Now, this is, after the war has actually ended, and maybe they have a point. I don't know. That sounds like a crazy, crazy time. And it actually, reading about these instances reminds me not necessarily of a wartime reference, but if you want to see this kind of shenanigans in action, just watch the movie Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland and Margaret O'Brien. There's a fantastic scene of Halloween with lots of fires, like bonfire and shenanigans and all kinds of fun stuff. So highly recommend. And, a side note, I just looked up the movie, Meet Me in St. Louis, to make sure I got Margaret's name correct. And it was made in 1944. So, wow, it is a wartime movie, even if it was set in an earlier time period. I'm just so thrilled to find that out. Some final thoughts on trick-or-treating. There's this article from the Lawrence County News in Illinois, November 1st, 1945. And it's this column called Inquiring Reporter. The question that they asked was, what do you think of the idea, trick or treat? And it doesn't say that they interviewed children, but I'm getting a sense that they maybe did, just based on what they said. These are their responses. Billy Musgrave said, it is all right if they do not carry their tricks too far. Stinker Ferial said, trick or treat is a grade school kids game, although it wouldn't be a bad racket nowadays because people have plenty of money to give you. Treva Price said, it's fine, except most everyone spends some of their little time in thinking of a trick, but people actually give you a treat and you're angry to think you did all that mental activity for nothing. But then if they don't treat you, you're angry anyway. Due to these facts, I'm surely glad I've outgrown such things, else I would have spent a very unhappy Halloween. Pat Ford said, trick or treat is a lot of fun if the people who play it will keep their senses and not be destructive. Dale Gibson said, trick or treats is okay if you get things good to eat and that are worth the time you have trying to get things to eat. And finally, Gene Pierman said, I believe trick or treat can be a lot of fun if you keep it in its place and be fair. Even though you think you are getting too old for such a thing, it is fun to go back and do such things. Who wants to get old? We spent some time talking about tricks, and now I wanted to talk about the treats. candy, when candy wasn't available to give out for trick-or-treating, folks gave out fruit, popcorn, gum, and nuts. I even found an account where someone gave out whistles. What I found in ads, like I talked a little bit before about grocery stores saying they have candy. Well, this is the type of stuff that they carried. A trick-or-treat mix, which looked like hard candies in the shape of pumpkins. It was kind of hard to tell. Candy corn, or sometimes I saw it referred to as marshmallow cream corn. Orange and black cello-wrapped suckers. Orange and black gumdrops and jelly beans. Quote-unquote fall candy special harvest mix. A colorful assortment of covered nuts, licorice pieces, etc. Peanut brittle, picoa brittle, which was peanuts and coconut brittle. Halloween cream mix. I wonder if that's kind of like like today you see candy corn, but with like pumpkins in there too. So I don't know. It doesn't really say, but those are the different types of candies that I found in ads. Now let's talk about traditional Halloween foods. I found so many different kinds, different references. The consensus is that apples, donuts, and cider were pretty much the standard fare, along with popcorn. In the Women's Home Companion article, The Scarecrow AWOL, it says, Halloween food is traditional. Be sure you have plenty of frankfurters or hamburgers, heaped with pickle relish and served on toasted rolls, along with cider, donuts, popcorn, and apples. I also found pumpkin pie was very popular for Halloween. Halloween cakes, ice cream, Halloween cookies. The Atlanta Constitution says refreshments are equally simple. Gingerbread, apples on a stick, hot spiced punch, cookies cut in fantastic shapes, donuts, popcorn, and molasses candy for pulling are traditional and good fun besides. And that was an article that was talking about how to have like a thrifty Halloween party. I even found this fantastic headline, Grown-ups Deserve Halloween Party, with quote-unquote adult foods like pumpkin sandwiches, orange frosted donuts, pumpkin ginger creams, and pumpkin ice cream. And when it comes to the donuts, I noticed that quite a bit, that you could buy either frosted donuts or you could buy plain donuts and frost them yourselves. There's all kinds of creations just using donuts. It was pretty fun. The Ogden Standard Examiner from 1944 had some fun ways to enjoy food at Halloween parties along specific themes. One was Hobo's Convention, sandwiches and oranges wrapped in newspaper and served with hot chocolate. And I did notice that a hobo was a popular costume choice. Barnyard Party with donuts and cider. A potluck hike, where each person brings one thing in a sufficient amount for the entire group. Don't tell what you bring. It's more fun. And a ghost parade. Different homes of members of the parade are picked to serve a certain part of the menu. Such refreshments as orange punch and brown cupcakes, hot dogs, buns, hot drink and apples, popcorn, cider, sandwiches, pickles, and individual pumpkin pies, orange ice cream and brown cookies with orange icing decorated on his faces, frozen fruit salad, toasted cheese sandwiches, hot drink and assorted cookies, red candied apples on sticks, ice cream, and assorted colored cookies would give any hungry ghost a treat. So it sounds like a progressive dinner, essentially, and but it's way more fun to call it a ghost parade. I also noticed that there was a lot of fun Halloween food names, and some of which I made. Goblin gingerbread, jack-o'-lantern rennet custard, pumpkin face tarts, Halloween salad, lantern salad, witchy tarts, jack-o'-lantern brew, black cat cake, silver moon cake, ghost cakes. I mean, some of the names are just fantastic. Speaking of donuts, I had noticed mentions in newspapers and magazine ads. They were mentioning that it was Donut Week. I thought this was interesting, and Donut Week was October 26th through the 31st. And I mean, I saw mentions of it, and so, they're advertising donuts for sale, donuts are on sale, but I didn't really know why. And so I searched for it, and apparently there is a history to this. There's this article called This is Donut Week. And under the picture of a woman with 2 service members. It says dunking 1917 style, October 26th through the 31st. Simultaneous with the observance of National Donut Week will mark the 25th anniversary of serving of the first donut to the doughboys in World War I. Now, this was in 1942. So 1942 was the 25th anniversary of the very first serving of donuts to soldiers in World War I. Wow, that is just really cool to know. The article goes on to say it was a quarter century ago this October that 2 canteen workers in World War I handed out those little round cakes, donuts, which went down in history as the American doughboy's symbol of home, mother, sweetheart, wife, sister. The place was the small French village of Monsieur-sur-Saulx, sorry if I mispronounced that, where 800 sad, homesick AEF men were stationed. The rain came down in torrents that day. In the fall of 1917, 35 rainy yesterdays had preceded it. Gloom hung heavier than the overcast clouds outdoors or the gray spiderwebs that draped the walls and ceilings of the stables and outbuildings the doughboys called home. The canteen women wanted to do something to cheer the boys up. The question was what? They hit on the idea, American home cooking, and the next thing that came to mind was donuts, and what a success they were. What those donuts did for the men in lifting their spirits and morale won't be found in the official chronicles of the First World War, but a tender, sentimental, lasting attachment was formed that made the term doughboys and donuts as inseparable as ham and eggs. It was the birth of a tradition, but it didn't really get underway on a large scale until the boys came marching home, bringing their love for donuts with them. It goes on to say that a group of veterans of World War I got together in 1942 to commemorate the 25th anniversary of that event. And so October 26th through the 31st is the period that they set for the celebration. The article goes on to say the members of the 77th Division Association, vets who served abroad as part of the famous Liberty Division, started the idea, and hundreds of other veteran organizations have hopped on the bandwagon under the name of the 25th Anniversary Doughboy Donut Commemorative Committee. And so their elaborate plans have been made for various celebrations throughout the country. Those behind the movement are using the commemorative event as an impetus to get the public behind the USO drives, etc., pointing out the important part the donut and other refreshing pickups play in building the morale of our uniformed men. What a heartwarming connection. I mean, at the World War II museum I volunteer at in Pennsylvania, in Gettysburg, they have one of these Red Cross mobiles that are for handing out donuts. And it's a World War II vehicle, not World War I. And so, I mean, now that makes sense, that connection there. So really cool. So if you ever come across that reference for Donut Week, that is the history behind it. Another interesting Halloween treat that I came across was called the Goblin Cake. And it was, one newspaper ad proclaimed that it was the National Halloween Cake. It takes different forms depending on who's making it, I guess. It seems to be a Northwest, Western, Far West Coast phenomenon. I didn't find it in any other papers. I did find one in Utah and one in Michigan, so I take that back. But most of them were in Oregon or California. And these references that I found come from 1942, 43, 44, 45, like just all through the war. They're talking about these goblin cakes. In the Medford Mail Tribune, which is Oregon, it says, again, we present Betty Crocker's famous Halloween cake, a chocolate orange marble cake. And I had to do some digging on this because they're referencing Betty Crocker specifically. And I found this other Medford Mail, a Tribune article talking about it. All this week, we feature the traditional Halloween goblin cake, a rich chocolate and orange marble layer cake made from a Betty Crocker recipe, iced with a delicious creamy chocolate and orange icing. And so I was like, where is this Betty Crocker recipe? So I didn't find a specific Betty Crocker goblin cake recipe, but I did find a recipe for Betty Crocker marble cake. It was hard to tell if Betty Crocker Company created it. Like this, it seemed to be like a new technique of making a cake. So maybe this was the very start. I'd have to dig more into it, but very interesting. So there's this marbled type, chocolate and orange. I found another Medford mail, like they talked about all the time. A chocolate cake decorated with a jack-o'-lantern face or witch. Another reference from California says one layer is orange, the other chocolate, covered with creamy, glossy orange icing, decorated with milk chocolate shavings on top. Other cakes have an orange and black witch cleverly depicted on top center. These are all in grocery store ads. I need to mention. In the Oregon Daily Journal, it says chocolate, orange, and cake mix marbled with chocolate icing on the sides, topped with orange icing and Halloween decorations. In another California paper, Goblin Cake, the chocolate cake with jack-o'-lantern face and a free mask. Oh, you get a free mask with theirs. And then in the Lansing State Journal, it's completely different. Goblin Cake, vanilla cake frosted with pale yellow frosting and decorated with black cats surrounded by apple candle holders. So this is apples with the top cut out and you can stick a candle in it. Then in the Salt Lake Tribune, Goblin Cake, a special occasion cake appropriate for that party or dinner, a new taste sensation. Interestingly, I also found a reference for this in an Ontario, Canada newspaper, and it is also completely different. It was a Hall's Bakery ad. Goblin Cake, a 2-layer light spice cake with orange buttercream icing decorated in true Halloween style. The family will love it. So a little deep dive into Goblin Cake. I couldn't help myself because I was like, what is this cake? And it's just interesting how different it was. Then there was Halloween ice cream. This was a very specific ice cream. It was a brick of ice cream with a pumpkin shape going through the center. And my stepmother was telling me that I asked her if she knew about this Halloween ice cream with the pumpkin. She's like, oh, yeah. Yeah. And she mentioned there's some other shapes, too, that she had seen. So, yeah, interesting. Now, she wasn't born in wartime. She was post-war baby, but that was still around. Seal Test, the ice cream company, created their own version, an attractive, colorful, ready-to-serve dessert that will make a real hit at your Halloween dinner or party. It's your Union Seal Test pint package that cuts into 4 generous portions, each slice showing an orange-colored pumpkin on a creamy white background. In the Statesman Journal in Oregon, it says, a festive brick for Halloween with a pumpkin-shaped center of pumpkin ice cream in vanilla brick. The spicy, unusual flavor of pumpkin ice cream is a once-a-year treat, so don't miss it. Serve this attractive, flavorful dessert for a successful Halloween party. In Missouri, it describes it as a Halloween brick ice cream made with delicious maple ice cream and orange ice cream pumpkin center. A full quart brick was 25 cents. And then in Ohio, they describe this Halloween ice cream as a delicious 2-layer combination of orange, pineapple, and vanilla ice cream. It's a new combination that you're sure to like and will want to serve to all your guests at your Halloween party. And finally, in the Pittsburgh Press from Pennsylvania, it describes it as an orange pineapple pumpkin centered in black walnut ice cream. Wow, so many different kinds. Now, I wanted to make a quick note about pumpkin pie spice. Since this is pumpkin spice season, in the past, at least mostly on Instagram, I've talked about how I've never seen a reference for pumpkin pie spice, so I didn't even think it existed at this time. And in cookbooks, it's true. I don't think I've ever come across a reference for pumpkin pie spice blend. But if you look in the newspapers, it did exist. And I, in fact, found a tin online. I think it actually might be a wartime tin that's got cardboard. So I now have that in my collection to remind me that I need to check more, check deeper. I had no idea. So, it's a good example of how research is a continually evolving thing that we might feel like we know something for sure, but then we find more evidence later. So I just wanted to mention that it was a thing, but for some reason cookbooks just didn't call for it. I guess it was up to whoever's doing the baking to add it in if they felt like it. So we have learned quite a bit about Halloween and wartime. Not everything. This is just scratching the surface, but I hope it gives you a good idea of what it was like for families and folks who were celebrating Halloween in wartime, kind of the challenges that they came up against, and also the crazy shenanigans that they tried to prevent. Not always successfully. A lot of great, yummy recipes, which brings us to our cookbook feature. For the cookbook feature in this episode, I wanted to do something a little different. So there's actually not a cookbook feature per se, but we are going to be looking at 3 Halloween recipes from various newspapers from around the country. And I did a survey poll kind of a thing on Substack and had a lot of fun recipes for people to choose from. And then my paid subscribers narrowed it down to our final 3, which was hard because there was a lot of fun looking ones. The first one was jack-o'-lantern brew. This recipe calls for 1 cup strong coffee, 2 squares unsweetened chocolate, 3 tablespoons sugar, a dash of salt, and 3 cups of milk. And so you make your coffee extra strong by using 1.5 tablespoons for each cup of water. You add the chocolate to the coffee on top of a double boiler and place over a low flame, stirring until the chocolate is melted and blended. Add sugar and salt and boil 4 minutes, stirring constantly. And then the directions were a little confusing. It says then to place over boiling water, but you've been doing that the whole time. Then you add the milk gradually, stirring constantly. Then you heat it. I thought it was already heating. When hot, beat with rotary egg beater until frothy. Serve hot, top with whipped cream if desired. Serves 4. So a pretty seemingly straightforward recipe. What I found with all of my recipes was that the newspaper recipes of the 1940s were pretty much like Pinterest today. It is so hit or miss whether they were good or not. I feel like my recipes were cursed. This one wasn't as bad. This one, so I don't drink coffee. We don't keep it in the house. And so I use Postum instead. And so I made some extra strong Postum, mixed it, just like it says, with the square of chocolate and the sugar and the salt and the milk. It didn't froth up, for one. The other thing was that the chocolate never fully mixed in. And I feel like where this could be improved is by taking out the squares of unsweetened chocolate altogether and replacing it with cocoa blended with the sugar. And when you mix a powder with something like sugar, it blends much easily into a liquid. So I think that would have been more successful because even still, like, the day or two after, there's like chocolate bits in the bottom. And this wasn't to say that I wasn't boiling it, like it was hot. It just never fully incorporated. So that was weird. I even use a double boiler. I feel like this maybe was a little pointless. So it took forever. I didn't have time for this. I'm in grad school. I lost so much patience. But in the end, the end product was delicious, especially with the whipped cream. It was really, really good. So even though I tried it with Postum, I think the result with coffee would be just as good. Obviously, that's what the original recipe says. So I actually do recommend this jack-o'-lantern brew. It's really good. That recipe was from The Reporter from 1942. It's a Pennsylvania newspaper. This next one that was voted in was Ginger Cats from the Atlanta Constitution in Georgia from 1945. Now, this was a bit different because it was from an ad. It just said ginger cats, and they suggested you could use them as place card holders or whatever. I saw several references to ginger cats and that they were cookies. So I had to hunt around for a ginger cookie recipe that would work. And I found this one from the Des Moines Register. Try cat cookies for Beggar's Night. And that actually jogs my memory. My stepmom was telling me that the October 30th, they called it Beggar's Night, not Halloween night. Obviously, that's the next day, but they called it Beggar's Night. So they advertised molasses cat cookies When the beggars come round to your door on their traditional night, surprise them with these delicious molasses cookies with quaint cat faces. They're perfect for your Halloween party, too. So I used my cat cookie cutter and made these soft molasses cookies. Once again, this recipe was cursed. This particular recipe was not good. It had way too much flour and not enough liquid. I don't know. It was bizarre. It just didn't turn out good. They didn't taste good, and it doesn't call for salt. I added a little bit of salt. It just didn't turn out. So I'm not going to give you that recipe. So I had to hunt around for another molasses ginger cookie recipe that I could make these dang ginger cats. So I found another one, and I will give you the successful recipe. Okay, so this was much better proportion. So this first one had like 4 cups of flour, which was way off. This one only had 2.5 cups of flour and a half cup of butter, and that actually mixed up much better. And the spiciness was there. Once again, it doesn't call for salt, but I did add salt. 2.5 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1 teaspoon. Oh, never mind. It has salt. That's why it tasted good. 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon ginger, 1 cup of molasses, half teaspoon soda. I think I might have added cinnamon to this one. Half cup butter or other shortening. It's so straightforward. You sift it, measure, add the dry ingredients, then you heat the molasses and add the fat to melt it, and then you add it all together. You chill it, and then you roll them and cut out the dough. So it was a little hard to handle, but I mean, they still made some really yummy cookies. In fact, those were all gone. The other ones, people weren't touching them at all. No one in my family wanted to eat the other ones. So that tells you everything. I will have that recipe for you. Finally was apple donuts with caramel frosting. And this came from 2 different newspapers. The apple donuts, I didn't write it down. I will have the reference on my Substack. For some reason, it's not in my notes. It is for 1 pint sour milk, 2 eggs, 1.5 teaspoons of soda, half cup shortening, 1 cup sugar, 4 cups flour, or enough to make a stiff dough, 1 cup finely chopped apples. Another cursed recipe. Ugh. So if you notice, it's 2 cups of milk to 4 cups of flour. It did not make a dough you could roll out. It was like sticky batter. I had to add so much more flour, like almost 7 cups of flour to get it to be able to handle. And by that point, the apple flavor is so diluted. I was so angry. Like, I went and made the donuts and everything and tasted them. I'm like, oh my gosh, this was a major fail. So I rewrote the recipe with the correct proportions, and it turned out much better. The apple, I couldn't taste it very well. Like, you could tell apple chunks were in there, but they're not super noticeable unless you use a tartar apple. I use Gala, but you could use a tartar apple so that the flavor might stand out more. And then the caramel frosting was also a cursed recipe, keeping in the theme of Halloween. So the original recipe, had you use a can of sweetened condensed milk, leftover coffee, salt, vanilla. And then you're supposed to empty the can into a saucepan and then fill the can with cold coffee and add condensed milk. So that was confusing. Then add salt. It was so liquidy, like a soup. And there was no way you could spread that on anything. And so I chucked that recipe out the window. That was horrible. And then I turned to a 1930s cookbook for sweetened condensed milk and used their caramel frosting. Kind of tweaked it to work because they had other things added in. But I made a caramel frosting that was 1 can of dulce de leche, which you can make yourself, or you can buy it at the store. I couldn't find it in my regular grocery stores, but if you go to a Mexican food grocery store, they will have it. So And then I added a tablespoon of powdered sugar and a teaspoon of vanilla. And that made a much, much better frosting. It is definitely heavy on the dulce de leche, of course, because that's all it is. But adding that powdered sugar definitely and the vanilla definitely improved. It was really, really tasty. And the leftovers my son has been using with sliced apples. So it's like apples and caramel. It's really good. I have made dulce de leche in a past episode, my Bracero episode. You can boil a can of sweetened condensed milk in water for like 4 hours and it'll turn into dulce de leche. Or you can, if you have an Instant Pot, you can do it in 20 minutes. So I will have links on how to do that either way. So I did spread this caramel frosting on the apple donuts, and it was a bit of a disappointment only because the apple flavor wasn't strong enough on its own. And then when I added the caramel frosting, it was very strong flavor. So all I could taste was that. And so I was like, oh, I guess that's okay. I prefer to have them separate. So then I just took the donuts and I shook them in a bag of like cinnamon powdered sugar, and they tasted great. So, I can't tell you how discouraged I felt with these recipes. Curse these newspaper recipes. I have found good ones, but for some reason, these were not as good. Really hit or miss. I don't know if they tested these. Like in cookbooks, they usually go through some pretty heavy testing, but newspapers, it's like I said, it's like Pinterest. You never know. Anyway, so I will have the good recipes on my Substack. And for now, we are going to turn to our home front highlight, which will be Halloween poems written by 3rd and 6th grade school children in 1942. But in order to do that, we need to set the mood a little bit. Halloween by Benjamin Harrison. Halloween will soon be here, the jolliest time of the year. Parties with popcorn, candy, and apples. All the boys and girls will be so happy. Witches will ride on broomsticks so high. Goblins will watch us as we go by. Halloween Fright by Mike Zavogalis. Halloween Eve is full of frights, with its curious noises and funny sights. You and I shall have lots of fun. We can scare the people and then run. We'll attend a party and play some games. Each shall be called by a strange new name. You be a witch and I a goblin. The rest as ghosts will come a-bobbin. Halloween by Judith Jaffa. Halloween night will soon be here. It's the funniest night of the year. Black cats, goblins, bats, and witches tall come out to dance and make fun for all. Witches riding broomsticks with the moon so bright will make us scream from fright on Halloween night. Halloween This Year by Mary Danijel. Halloween will soon be here, with its hours of fun and cheer. Witches riding through the air, and cats and owls with coal-black hair. This year, above them all, we should heed Uncle Sam's call. Do not expect your horns of tin. Save the tin for our fighting men. Thank you so much for joining me for this special episode of the Victory Kitchen. I hope you will join me over on Substack. That's where I post all of my research, including fun pictures and all the recipes. I am going to try and get this Substack post up soon, but I am balancing a very heavy grad school workload. So I will get that up as soon as I possibly can, definitely before Halloween. So thank you so much for supporting this podcast. If you haven't yet, please subscribe on Substack to victorykitchenpodcast.substack.com. And leave a comment, say hi. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.